Let's take a block at H-1, also called peekaboo. When we look at this block, it's not really that complicated. We have a little 4-patch in the center, followed by a border, and then some added pieces to create that outer border. So first of all, the 4-patch, we have the 2 muslin, which is what I'll be using, and then my 2 focus fabrics, which will be a red fabric. And then my focus fabric is used again for this border on the outside. And then on the outside, we see the focus fabric is used for these 4 pieces here, which will actually be a larger rectangle that I'll cut down. We have 2 different triangles. We will be actually piecing this whole unit together as one. Same with this. These units here are going to be pieced together as one unit and then sewn together. So first let's focus on this center. Each of these pieces in the center are all of the same width. When you measure them in the block itself, they're a very odd measurement. So we're going to adjust just slightly. So these are going to all be 3/4 of an inch wide when they're finished. That means I need to cut each of these little squares to be 1 1/4 inches square. Then these 2 are the same length. These are both 1 1/2 inches finished, so I'm going to cut them 2 inches long by 1 1/4 inches wide. I'll cut 2 of those. And then for this piece, this is 3 inches long. So I'll be cutting this 3 1/2 inches long by 1 1/4 inches wide. The fabric I've chosen for this block is this pretty little red with the fan type pattern and the flowers. This fabric I do have just scraps of, so I'm hoping that there will be enough here to cut all my pieces. I should be able to cut those strips of the border around that little center 4-patch out of these, and possibly get the little 4-patch corners. There's only 2 of them that I need. And then use this larger piece for the bigger pieces on the outside of the block. I got a little involved in sewing this, but as you can see, I've got my 4-patch sewn together, and I have the 2 shorter ends sewn on. Next, I will be sewing these longer strips over here. This block will end up being on the point here. So I just about have this center section for this block stitched together. I now have the center part of this block all stitched and pressed down. And now we need to work on the outer parts, but I wanted to take a look at that again. So as you can see with this, we've got our main fabric. The focus fabric is these large, they're rectangles, but they're trimmed down. So they're just a little awkward. It's not really a great measurement to try to figure out. And then down here we've got these triangles, which I think I am just going to do, since this is from the muslin, I'm just going to do rectangles that are long enough that can be trimmed. Now I am dealing with running out of fabric, which I was afraid I would, but I have these fabrics and they're trimmed to the right width. This piece is long enough. I can definitely get 2 pieces out of it. So you can see if I have a little bit left over, and I'll have plenty for the seam allowance. This piece, which is all I have left, I have some tiny little scraps, but this piece, if I do the same thing and I bring it in, it's really cutting it close. Right there is is that corner, and it meets right up there. So I'm going to try to make just a very scant seam. So we're going to hope for the best on that one. What I'm going to do is cut some rectangle pieces, some strips that I can sew to either side of these, so that way I can just have a piece that goes straight across, stitch it on, and trim it to size. Okay, let me show you where my progress is so far. When I was looking at these sections here, the colored strips, I was struggling with because I didn't have enough fabric. But what I decided to do was cut them all down to the same size, so they're all a little bit thinner, because then it will be even all around. You'll notice with my side pieces, I did not measure them, partly because what we're dealing with is this angle part here, and I struggle a lot with trying to get the measurements just right so that it's not going to be too small. So what I did is I just made sure it's large enough that it overlaps, so we'll make a complete rectangle. I'm going to trim these to the even size, and then when I make the next part, I will have enough of the muslin to go over even more. That way, when the block is done and I trim it, then I can just trim it to size, and I'll have that excess that I can cut off. I know this isn't very scientific or precise in measurements, but this kind of method works well for me, just cutting pieces that are a little bit larger and trimming them to size, especially with these odd pieces that are at angles, and I don't have the measurements from Jane herself or from the author of the book. So my next step will be to take these last two side pieces and sew the muslin to the sides. I've already got the lines marked for my stitching lines. So here we go. I have realized I just made a huge error. I sewed these two side pieces on, and I am not sure what I was thinking. But then I took my ruler and noticed, oh my, there's a ton of extra fabric on either side. Let me trim some of that off so we have about a quarter extra. But if you notice, I trimmed it with the block being this way and my ruler being even with that. That's not how it's supposed to be. My block is going to be this way, and my ruler needs to be in this direction. See, we've got a little bit of a glare. Let me get rid of that. My block needs to be this way, and when I trim that, you know what I trimmed off? This corner here. If I had left that extra on that I had trimmed off, I would be just reaching the corners. I don't have enough of this red fabric to fix that. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to start over with a different red fabric. I now have all of the pieces sewn together on this block. For these red triangles, these ended up being about 2.5 inches in length to sew them on, and these corner squares ended up being about 1.5 inches to give me enough room. And when I put my ruler down, I line it up here, and you can see, let me get it in the center. When I have it lined up, You can see that I am just at the edge for some of these triangle parts here. So I'm going to trim this up and then we'll take a look at that finished block. Here is the completed block H1. When we look at these little triangles on the edges, a couple of them are a little close to that 1/4 inch seam allowance, but when I sew the strips on, they should be okay. Overall, this wasn't too bad of a block. The most difficult part was doing these sections here just because it was hard for me to figure out what the measurement would be. But having these the length of 2.5 inches seemed to be just enough, and these little squares at 1.5 seemed to work really well for me. I hope you enjoyed the walkthrough on how I made this block. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them below or send me an email at sewitseamscreations@outlook.com. If you like this video, go ahead and like and subscribe, and you can hit the notification bell to be notified the next time I upload a video. This is Veronica Johnson with Sew It Seams, and I hope you have a great day. Keep stitching.